Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Why would you want to just randomly approach an animal that's many times larger than you without being very careful about it? Sounds like someone has never really experienced outdoor and wildlife and thinks that everything is like it is in the movies. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. No, random lady, your daughter cannot ride my horse. I, 20-year-old female, was grooming my horse Clyde yesterday when a woman came up to me tugging along a kid around 6 or 7. For context, the stable hands/trainers don't need to wear specific clothes, although they usually wear the stable shirts to be more recognizable towards new people. I was wearing some tan breeches and a red polo, nothing really special, but I tended to get confused as staff pretty often, which I understand. The Karen was wearing way too expensive-looking clothes to be in a barn, but I assumed she was just going to drop off the kid and come back at the end of the lesson. As I saw her direct her attention towards me, I prepared my whole speech about how I didn't work there and where I could direct you to go. Before I could even get a word out, she launched into a tirade about how terrible the service was and how she had spent hours trying to find someone to help her. I doubt it was more than 5 minutes. The stable wasn't that big. "Oh, I began, being cut off by her screaming in my face to let her kid ride my horse. I tried to calmly explain that no, her kid couldn't ride my horse, and no, she cannot let her kid ride any other horses in the barn. No matter what I said, I couldn't convince her that I didn't work there, and that couldn't just let her daughter ride. Clyde is not fully trained as I recently got him and still very young and inexperienced. I wouldn't even let a kid groom him, as he tends to nip at people. The kid proceeded to try and duck past me and try to pet his nose. I grabbed the kid's shoulder and gently pushed her back, genuinely worried about Clyde biting her. Karen gasped and screamed, 'My daughter has every right to touch that horse. She's probably even better with horses than you are. Besides, you're just a worker, so don't you dare push my kid.' That made me blow my casket. Your daughter is not going to touch my horse. He is not suitable with kids and could injure your daughter. Your daughter does not know more than me. I've been riding for 15 years, and I don't work here. Leave me alone," I shouted, wanting to punch that Karen straight in the face. At this point, my horse was starting to freak out, and I turned to lead him back to his stall and just calm him and myself. Some band staff came running over trying to assess what was happening. The woman kept screaming at me, but I just couldn't deal with her anymore and walked away since the staff had her occupied. My friend who worked there told me that they had to threaten to call the cops to get her to leave because she kept demanding to have her child ride every single horse she saw. She's also banned from the stable now, so happy ending at least. How do people not understand that a 1,000-pound animal can be dangerous? You always take the owner's warnings when approaching the horse. And our next story. HOA said we can't park outside. When I was growing up, we lived in a tucked-away private gated community with less than 30 or so houses in it. They had a small private HOA ran only by the homeowners, not a corporation. They always made these moronic rules, but the one that stood out the most was no parking on your street. This was especially difficult for my family. We had my mother, stepfather, my 2 brothers, and my 2 step-siblings living in that house year-round. All of us had cars. That's 7 cars consistently at the house. We had a 3-car garage, so that's only 3 cars. Our driveway was on a massive incline, which made things worse. We'd have to park behind the garage and then 2 cars behind those cars. Made things even worse when we decided to turn the 3rd-car garage into a home gym. Was a single-car garage detached from the 2-car garage? It was a cluster F when someone in the garage had to leave before those 4 cars blocking them. We eventually just parked on the street like normal people and racked up fines after fines until they threatened to have every car on the street towed in the middle of the night. After a year of this bullcrap, my parents and a few other homeowners who had the same situation with their family took action. The HOA was run by a few board members and a chairman who were older people that had lived there for 20 years since the neighborhood was developed, and no one challenged them. No one came to those meetings, literally only the board. So they ended up getting proxy signatures from every homeowner and outvoted them on major changes to the neighborhood, including that stupid parking situation. They ousted the chairman of the board, and he apparently threw a temper tantrum in front of everyone. And our next story. How my father became HOA president. My family moved into an HOA neighborhood, and it made sense to have the HOA. There were things that needed to be maintained by the community that were not a part of anyone's specific property, nor the problem of the county. We were also told by multiple people that some of the rules were never enforced as long as common sense was followed, i.e. quantity of vehicles versus people who drive and work requirements. Fast forward a few years. Dad builds a large shed on the back of the property, pulls the permit, submits notice to the HOA, double-checks the distance from property line to the shed. Nothing gets said. About a year and a half later, he decides he's going to run power and expand it further, doesn't need to pull permits, notifies the HOA out of courtesy, completes construction. 3 months later, there's a complaint. Apparently, the shed, almost a barn at this point, is an eyesore because it's all weathered plywood, not painted or sided. The HOA is also claiming that we didn't get permission to run electrical or plumbing and that the building is too close to the property line. This sets off red flags for Dad. How the F do they know we have plumbing? And it's more plumbing because it's a sink with water supplied by a rain barrel just to rinse your hands off before walking up to the house. The drain goes behind the barn where the ground slopes away. Also, to measure the property line, they would have had to trespass to do a proper measurement, as well as what did they measure? The barn is 15 feet inside the property line, 5 feet from the fence line, and there only needs to be 10 feet from property line to the building. So Dad responds by submitting the measurements and survey from when he had the property line checked, painted the barn red and white, so now it's super visible and obvious, supplied the board with county building codes and a copy of their own bylaws that show his power run and sink is legal, and then, as a courtesy, submits more plans that he was on the fence about for further expansion of the barn. The HOA files an injunction, I think that's the right term, preventing him from doing further upgrades to the building, and he goes to talk with the HOA's lawyer, who basically tells him he advised the board not to pursue this, but they didn't listen. Dad returns home to find me, 16 at the time, trying to run upgraded power cable through the buried conduit while someone claiming to be from the HOA board stands over me, yelling at me to cease and desist, waving papers and threatening to call police. Dad had asked me to pull the old power cable and run the new cable because he'd been worried that the old cable was not up to the code of the existing building or met the bare minimum and wanted a safety buffer, much less once it was further upgraded. Obviously, HOA guy had trespassed, and Dad liked it even less that the guy threatened me. He actually physically tried to stop me from working because he thought because he was significantly taller than me, he was stronger than me. I just carefully pushed him aside and kept going because I respected and feared Dad more than this idiot. Cops were called. Idiot was reminded that just because he's on the HOA board, he does not have the right to trespass, and we would ignore the fact that he put his hands on a minor in an attempt to move me away from the area if he promised to never come back or ever talk to me again. Basically, a voluntary restraining order that wouldn't hold up in court if challenged. It was around this time someone else on the board decided to also start enforcing the vehicle bylaw that the HOA had basically 2 vehicles per household, and the household could apply yearly for additional vehicles to be added to the property. 1 application per vehicle was required, with processing fees that we later found out didn't go to the HOA general funds, but the person processing the applications. Well, we got targeted pretty quickly. Dad and Mom's truck and SUV, then the car I inherited from my grandfather when he died, my project truck that I worked on every week, Dad's work truck, wasn't always present, but often enough, Dad's Jeep that was his fun toy/money sink, and we were on the verge of needing another car for my little sister. 5 to 6 vehicles growing to a max of 7 for a family of 4. And to be clear, it's not like they were parked all over the place. We'd expanded the driveway when we first moved in to accommodate additional vehicles, well within the HOA's rules, and all but my truck were registered, insured, and drivable. In fact, the Jeep and my truck spent most of the time in the backyard, not visible from the street, at the barn where all the tools were. We acquired most of the vehicles within a single year and had the intention to apply for the exception once we figured out what the long-term plan was with my car/truck and my sister's potential car. The application for the exceptions were going to be made when Dad paid his yearly fee. But we got rejected on all of them and received a monthly fine for each vehicle on the property over the limit, including the sporadic appearance of the work truck. So Dad decides he's had enough, starts attending the public meetings, pulls copies of the bylaws, learns as much as he can about the extent of their powers, what they actually do in regards to their actual duties, and may or may not have asked me to go to do some late-night spying to find out if they were within the HOA rules and not exempting themselves. Holy crap, they were exempting themselves and also letting public spaces fall into disrepair. Next step was to perform a coup of the board. He and Mom started going door to door, chatting with people, felt them out on their stance on the HOA, and then drafted them to the cause if they felt like they wouldn't rat them out. During the next public meeting, with 9 months left to go before the next yearly election, Dad stood up, called for a vote of no confidence, and displayed a PowerPoint presentation of how the board was corrupt, pocketing money, not proving maintenance, and ignoring the bylaws to suit themselves. The board was blindsided, and they tried to stop us from presenting by pulling the power to the projector, but gave up when we started to hand out a printout of the presentation to anyone interested, or if they gave me an address, I would hand-deliver a physical CD copy of the presentation within a week. Dad was then nominated and ratified as the new president, formed a new board, and promised a new meeting next month with a list of changes to be approved and a list of things that needed to be done with a priority ranking. The new HOA then filed a civil suit for the money that had been pocketed against the old board, as well as monthly fines accrued since they either took office, years, or when the rules had been broken if such records existed. Most didn't. At the next meeting, a bunch of rules were struck down or simplified. Example, all vehicles on the property need to be registered/insured, parked in an approved park pad/driveway, no limit per household, no more applications or fees. The full list of things that needed to be done was presented, with gator removal and upgrades and improvements to the dam and spillway being the biggest ones. And a motion was passed to forgive the former board members of some of their fees, thus reducing the civil suit to the point where it made more sense to settle out of court. And then to make sure there was never a situation like this again, lack of transparency, Dad hired me, with board approval, to set up a web page to post minutes from monthly executive meetings, recordings of all general meetings, operating budgets so people could see where the money was being spent, and a bids report on jobs in the community with notes from the board so they could see why a contractor was chosen over another. Now things are being properly run, gators are removed every year and not when a pet goes missing or a carcass was found, fish are regularly stocked in all the ponds and lakes by a fish and wildlife expert, and a free fishing license is issued to each member when dues are paid, and there's now, more or less, a surplus in the HOA account since things are maintained and repaired before they go to catastrophic levels of broken. I say more or less because some major upgrades to the spillway recently caused them to dip into funds significantly, but was necessary due to the increase of flooding caused by a large nearby river. Overall, your family's efforts have not only improved the quality of life for residents, but also set a standard for effective community leadership. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.